as a veteran, running for the Conservative Party should say a lot about which party really has the best interest of veterans at heart. When I came back from Afghanistan, I was told that there is no pension available for me. I heard this many times in the media, I saw this on social media, and I found out that it wasn't true. In 2006, the Liberals put forward a new plan to support veterans, and in fairness, all three parties supported that plan. That plan gave a lump sum payment and 75% of your pay to the age of 65. So if a veteran came home injured, they got 75% of their pay all the way to the age of 65 and a lump sum payment up front. There was a realization that this was designed for the older generation veteran, but there was a realization younger vets needed this support after 2006, and this government has extended those benefits beyond the age of 65 for life. So we are back to a system with a lump sum payment and monthly payments for your entire life, acting very much like a pension. What is critically important that we do next is help educate the public about that and reach out to veteran communities and make sure they know that, and they don't buy the stuff like I did. They don't buy the talking points that there is no support available to them. We need to let them know that support's available, and we need to help them overcome that hyper-masculine culture to ask for support for their mental health issues.
Thank you. Yes, we didn't have this one right out of the gate. Where do you stand on Senate reform, and what would that look like?
So what we don't want to do as a Liberal government is create unnecessary constitutional discussions between the provinces and the federal government. We have a lot of priorities like transit and affordable housing and the economy. What we do want to do is make sure that we fix the system we had. Justin Trudeau did more in one day for Senate reform than any other leader before him when he released all Liberal senators from caucus. So there are no Liberal senators left. Yes, those who came before him absolutely did appoint them, but he stands for change. He wants to implement a process, a non-partisan process that would inform and help advise the Prime Minister on appointments. We need to make sure that people who are in the Senate deserve to be in the Senate. We need to make sure that people in the Senate are doing the job that they want to be that upper chamber of sober second thought. We need to make sure that we reform it. But what we can't do is get mired in these constitutional issues. Abolishment of the Senate is something that is very, very unrealistic. We know that the provinces don't stand united on that, and the likelihood of them going down that path is highly unlikely. We don't want to waste time on that, but we do need to reform it. We need to fix the process, and we need to make sure that the senators that we appoint understand the duties that they have, understand the responsibility to the public, and start to behave with honor and integrity. Something that I think has been severely lacking in the Senate, as we've seen of late with the various scandals that have erupted over the last few years. They've not taken their role seriously, and they need to start doing that because it's a privilege to serve the country.
Yeah, I too would like to see actually reform of the Senate. Abortion would be the wrong thing to do, but certainly reforming it, to perhaps U.S. now you have 2 senators from each province and territory, to give also the province and territory equal say on the issues forward. I believe that the Senate is a very important chamber, or could be an important chamber, if reform, to actually counter-check the passages of bills passed in Parliament. So having said that, the Green Party also proposes actually a council of citizens all over the country that works with governments on all levels and sets the priorities and strategies for the country. So I think these 3 chambers can do a lot and will work much, much better to give the people's right back and give them the ability to work and contribute in a democracy.
This is one of the rare times where you'll hear me say I agree with Stephen Harper when he wanted to get rid and abolish the Senate. An NDP government would abolish the Senate. Now, we think there's better ways that you could spend $100 billion a year. And I tell you, when I've been door knocking, I've heard people that have been extremely angered over the Senate scandal. Disgraced senators like Mike Duffy, Pamela Wallen, Patrick Rousseau, and many others, many now that are under investigation. for their spending sprees, and it's supposed to be, it was designed to be at the upper house a sober second thought, to reflect on legislation. And in the day, that may have been the case. Over the past number of decades, it's become a place where our partisan appointments go to raise money and funds for the particular party in power, or their party. So there has become, the Senate has seen its day. It's time to move on. It's time to put those $100 billion into better use for your health care, child care, affordable housing, infrastructure, helping small business. There's 100 billion ways we could help Canada better than this Senate.
I think there's probably nobody as angry at the Senate as the Prime Minister Stephen Harper is right now. It's been a big issue, and I agree actually with Mrs. Adcock. There's better ways to spend this money. The reality is the complicated constitutional challenges of reopening the Canadian Constitution may not make it worth it. The Prime Minister's plan right now is to not appoint any more senators. Constitutionally, they can go down to a very small number of senators there. That will save us some money, and after the election, I'm sure there'll be a lot more discussion about this issue.
Well, actually, I think that the Senate could fulfill its role as a body of sober second thought if it was truly a nonpartisan elected body. We get rid of this situation where you have patronage appointments of worn-out party hacks.
I think the battery is wearing out. Can you? Nope. We started with this. I got a whole big spreadsheet. I'm an accountant. We live on spreadsheets. I'm just going to let everybody know as we enter the last half hour that if your question isn't read out, Dawn is going to be putting it on the website and asking the candidates to comment on it there, or you can phone their offices, of course, and ask them the questions. But your questions, if not addressed tonight, will be put on our website. So we are starting with Marcus. Question about First Nations. Many of our First Nations live under third world conditions. How do we bring the living conditions of our First People up to the same standard as the rest of Canadian society?
Very difficult. First Nations have the rights to deal on their own issues. They govern themselves, and what they get, there's a lot of transfer of money. While I do believe that we can overall improve the services provided, that still doesn't actually address the issue how the money is being distributed among the tribe's members. And everyone who actually knows a little bit more about First Nations knows that they too have a very strong hierarchy. And that makes it really difficult to reach everyone on the tribal land. And so, honestly, that is a question that is in which I have to read myself more in. So it's very difficult for me to really fully address it. All I know is that the First Nations within their own groups have their own issues, and that makes it really difficult to help the ones most in need.
With First Nations, this is an issue of poverty in our country. As the question mentioned, many First Nations are living in third world conditions. Mold in their houses, substandard education. It's not something that we should be proud of. It's something that the federal government should address. An NDP government would address those issues by working with First Nations, providing the funding needed to address housing, education, and many of the other infrastructure challenges that First Nations face. We need to, first of all, establish a government-to-government relationship a good relationship. Tom Mulcair and the NDP is committed to establishing that working relationship. In fact, we have a number of candidates running for us that are First Nation, Native, or Métis. This is an important issue. We're actually committed to implementing within the first 100 days a public inquiry on the missing and murdered Aboriginal women and girls. 1,200 missing and murdered women and girls demands that we have what First Nations are calling for, and that's a public inquiry to get to the bottom of it and take real action.
The issue of First Nations, as brought by Mr. Jonathan, I think is correct, an issue of poverty, of how to help these people come up and seize their lives. I had a personal experience working on a recent art project helping, again, veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. We paired them up with First Nation carvers. And as we all know, when it comes to post-traumatic stress, it can be a very difficult issue, and our Western medicine doesn't have all the answers on how to fix it yet. But what we found working with these First Nation carvers is they are actually able to inform the process. We were doing a lot of narrative-type therapies where the veterans were telling their stories, putting them down, using their hands to tell the stories, and actually carving a non-traditional totem. This is an example of how we can actually look to our First Nations communities as an asset. When we're having these talks of growing the economy and bringing in new infrastructure and new jobs and new companies, it's already required eventually for a lot of them to get those contracts to actually engage with First Nations communities and offer their jobs first. And for me with the First Nations, I don't see it as a matter of charity or pity. I see it as a matter of taking advantage of the natural talents they have and the unique perspective they bring to the conversation.
Well, I addressed this question at the beginning of the meeting, but I would say that we fully support the call for a public inquiry into missing and murdered Aboriginal women. And I'd like to speak on that lack of transportation along Highway 9 now, Highway of Tears. Greyhound, a few years ago, Greyhound shut down public bus service along that. So these people they can't afford cars. They're not the only ones in this country that can't afford cars, but many of those people have no way of getting their groceries, no way of visiting their family.